the doors that were brought from the tombstone of um, of Ghazi, Mahmud of Ghazni. Um, this is, I think, a drawing that is there in England, some museum in England. But the doors that were brought back are lying in Agra fort. And they are called as Ghaznavi Darwaza because Somnath temple would not accept them. They are not real. Mother has spoken of 12 as double perfection, where both spiritual and material perfection get stabilized. So 12 is an interesting number. Manifestation has to begin from, actually, it is coming down from superconscious, but for the evolutionary purpose, it has to go from below, from the inconscious. Okay, good morning. Namaste to everyone. So, Sri Aurobindo's symbol, six-pointed star. First of all, thank you so much, Nilima, for the kind introduction and for inviting me to be a part of the Shakti Kumbh. So I thought I will talk about a little bit of the history of the six-pointed star itself, the hexagram, and the universality that it represents, and also the significance of number 6, and then the deeper symbolism of Sri Aurobindo's symbol. So that's what I will start with. And for anyone who is trying to walk the path of integral yoga, Sri Aurobindo and Mother are one. It's one consciousness. This is some of the three parts in which I'm going to kind of schedule my presentation. Now, there is an interesting history behind the symbol of Sri Aurobindo. And there is seemed to be some sort of a myth going around. There was one in the ashram, at least around 1930s, in an article written by Amal Kiran, K.D. Sethna, who was a very close associate, disciple of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and editor of ashram's main journal, Mother India, which Sri Aurobindo had said, it is my journal. And he was personally involved till he left his physical body in everything that was published in Mother India. So in one of the earlier issues in 1930s or so, Amal Kiran had mentioned that there was a myth going around from 1910 onwards, which was the first time, Paul Richard, who was Mother's husband, had come to meet Sri Aurobindo. And apparently, the myth is that he was told by the Mother to find out from this yogi in Pondicherry the significance of the six-pointed star, which is the seal of Solomon or the Star of David. And people probably had assumed that Sri Aurobindo had given Paul Richard some deeper significance of that. In around 1950s, a biography was being written of Sri Aurobindo by A.B. Purani ji. And when the draft was sent to the Mother underlined that sentence that Sri Aurobindo was approached by Paul Richard to find the deeper meaning of Star of David. She said, omit, this never happened. Another sentence in the same paragraph was that Sri Aurobindo was also asked the deeper meaning of lotus because it is also part of some symbol, and I'll come to that. And Mother again said, no, don't put this in the biography because I never asked. Paul might have had his own question. So that myth that Sri Aurobindo was approached as to the meaning of Seal of Solomon or Star of David was rejected by the Mother. But what is very clear is, like in 1957, that correction that she had made. But interestingly, there are some drawings of the Mother that are found in ashram archives. And some of them are dated around 1912. But these drawings were done in 1901, 1902, around from 1901 to 1904, where she had these drawings of several triangles and a square. And near the square, she wrote cross or square of equilibrium. Equilibrium is an interesting word, I'll come to that. Perfect fourfold realization. So, this is what she already had. This was the time where when she was working with Alma and Theon studying occultism in Algeria. So she was deeply into the symbolism, the occult symbolism of many of these geometrical shapes and many of the numbers as well. So at that time, she had already made drawings about that. And there is also a drawing of an hexagram with two intersecting triangles and a square in the middle. And the hexagram, of course, she had written the thing because the seal of Solomon was told by Theon, who was with whom mother was working on studying the occult sciences. And of course, hexagram, as we know, is kind of a universal symbol from an occult perspective, and we have seen this in various religio-spiritual traditions. And I've put few examples, different time periods from Turkey, in one of the monastery where it is Star of David. Then you have in Kosovo, 16th century, in Delhi, Humayun's tomb. It's a very important architectural symbol. And there is another, somewhat of a myth, somewhat of a probably historically accurate thing about the old gates of Somnath temple, which were stolen by Mahmud Ghaznavi. That these were built of sandalwood, and they also had the six-pointed star hexagram. But the story goes that at some time around early 19th century, Britishers were able to convince the Afghani administration to bring back these doors to the Somnath temple. And when the doors went to Somnath temple, the pujaris there, the archakas there, did not accept them because they said these are not original doors. They were made of some Afghani wood. So we don't know where the original doors to Somnath temple are. For many of you who you may not know this history, but Somnath temple is a very important Shiva temple. It's the first of the 12 Jyotirlings in India. And that temple was destroyed several times by various invaders. So, I mean, people have a very strong emotional reaction to that temple. And after independence, it was rebuilt, led by two individuals. One was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who was the home minister at that time. But the other one, who was mainly instrumental, a Gujarati devotee of Sri Aurobindo, not only devotee, but he was his student in Baroda. So Sri Aurobindo's connection, his footprint is everywhere. His name is K.M. Munshi. He wrote several letters to Nehru, and who was the first prime minister, who didn't want the temple to be rebuilt. But K.M. Munshi, actually, even before writing to Nehru, wrote to Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo blessed that work. So Sri Aurobindo's footprints are everywhere in the regeneration of Bharatiya culture, Indian civilization. We may not know all of this history. So anyway, but this is a replica of an image that the doors that were brought from the tombstone of Mahmud of Ghazi, Mahmud of Ghazni. This is, I think, a drawing that is there in England, some museum in England. But the doors that were brought back are lying in Agra fort. And they are called as Ghaznavi Darwaza because Somnath temple would not accept them. They are not real. So I just thought it's a little bit of interesting history. Again, across times and various cultures, you find this six-pointed star, hexagram. This is the oldest surviving complete copy of the Jewish Old Bible in Hebrew. 1008 CE, you find the Star of David. Then again, you find coins, various coins minted from Morocco or Ghazi, which is Afghanistan area, and another talismanic scroll, so 11th century. The first image is before the new terminals were built in Heathrow Airport. Till 1950s, the aerial view would be a hexagram. And the other one is just something that I discovered recently. A few months back, I was in Gwalior. This is a Gwalior fort. Again, I mean, I just was walking and it was there. And so I thought, oh, Nilima has called me for the six-pointed star. So I took a picture. So it's a very commonly found architectural motif because there is a meaning behind that. So that's what I'm trying to build. Okay, then in the Shakta tradition, in the chakras, the Anahat chakra also has this six-pointed star. And there, what it represents is the descending triangle represents the Shakti, and the ascending triangle represents the Shiva. And there is the Shatkon that comes in the middle. When the union of Shakti and Shiva is there, Skanda is born, right? Murugan, as we say in southern India, or Skanda, or Kartikeya. He goes by various names. He's the younger brother of Ganesha, another son of Shiva and Parvati, who was, I would say, who was brought into the existence, into the manifestation to fight the battle with the hostile forces. So there was a very conscious intention to bring back. He's also called as Kumara, the young child. And in southern India, he's generally represented as a child god, right? Now, the interesting thing is in Sri Aurobindo's Integral Yoga, if you were to look at from integral yogic perspective, the significance of Muruga or Kartike or Skanda, all these names are there, that would be the psychic being, the child, the inner child that comes from the aspiration and the grace, the union of aspiration and grace, the ascending aspiration and the descending grace. Then the psychic emerges, which is always in the form of a little spark. It's just psychic spark. It's a child. In the Veda also we have the symbolism of a offspring, child. So the connection is there because it is only the child who will be the new creation. And 6, interestingly, the significance, the spiritual or occult significance of the number 6 that Mother gives is also new creation. It's the new creation which will lead the march of the inner evolutionary journey that we are all aspiring for. It's the psychic in us. It's not going to be our vital, emotional self. It's not going to be certainly not our mind. It's the psychic spark in us. And in the Upanishad, that psychic spark is spoken of as Chaitya, the one conscious spark within. So whether or not, I mean, we may be conscious of it, but interestingly, the same idea of six-pointed star has been there in various religio-spiritual traditions. So that's the Anahat chakra. Interestingly, that's the heart chakra, and psychic is supposed to be behind the heart chakra. So you see how the things come together. So now let me go back to those drawings of Mother that were found in ashram archives, which were discovered in 1912. But the drawings from 1901, 1902, what was happening around that time was when Mother was working with Thion, there was a journal that she was working on called Le Cosmic Review. I can't speak the French accent. And there probably still are some copies available internet in the archives.org. This was a French journal, a review of cosmology from around the world. Look at the symbol. But the symbol that, again, Mother had designed, same what we see today in Sri Aurobindo's symbol. And Mother was managing the whole work of this journal, at least for a couple of years, starting 1904. So again, the six-pointed star. Now what is interesting is, what is different now is, from the earlier drawings, is there is a square and there is a lotus. There is no water yet. There is a lotus, right? So then the final symbol, and in a conversation with Sat Prem, Mother had said, very clearly, I designed the symbol and I based it on the original symbol of Cosmic Review. So the conversation that is dated December 15, 1962, she actually, Satprem had brought copies of Cosmic Review for her to see. And she says, you see the symbol? I was the one designed it, and Sri Aurobindo's symbol also I designed based on that one. So it's very clear that there has been a history of that. But what is now there is water. So we'll talk a little bit about the water. The lotus was there in Cosmic Review, but she now added water. But again, there were some revisions made to the symbol to make it more stylized and systemized, which were done in 1964. And by the way, the perfection that was added around 1964 was the perfection in the square. And we'll come to that in a minute, so that there is no, if you go back to this one, you see where the yum is written, it won't come as perfect square. It will be a little rectangular. The perfection came in the square, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, the second part about number 6. So there again, Amal Kiran is a resource for anybody interested in learning about the history of the ashram and history of Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's integral yoga. So he used to have very candid conversations with the mother on numerology also. So he has a couple of articles on understanding numerology in the light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's integral yoga. So in that article, he's done some very interesting analysis, and then he showed that to the mother also. I'm just bringing few examples. Sri Aurobindo's birth date, we all know, 1 + 5, 6, the significance of 6. Mother's birth date, 21, 2 + 1, 3, which is again, you multiplied by 2, 6. Sri Aurobindo's birth month, 8. From 8 to count to February is 6. From February to August is again 6. If you just look at the word mother, it's 6-letter word. But see, mother was very kind. She said, well, if you use the French word mère, that would be only 4. And if you take my name, Mira, that would be 5-letter word, though, of course, she and Sri Aurobindo always spelled it as M-I-R-A, not M-I-R-R-A. So that's why she said, don't get too rigid. Don't make any dogma out of any of this, but this is a good, interesting exercise for us to go a little deeper. Sri Aurobindo, 12 letters. Of course, Aurobindo Ghosh will not come like that. Or AG, which he used to sign for many years, AG, that wouldn't come to that. 1872, the year of Sri Aurobindo's birth and Mother's birth, 1878. Again, the difference is 6. Again, some interesting analysis, how the number, which are all multiples of 3 or 6, are always coming. These are all interesting discoveries Amal Kiran ji had made about number 6. So I'm not going to go into all that details. But maybe the interesting one is 42, because there is an interesting, I'll talk in a minute about 42. 18 is when you add the digits of Sri Aurobindo's year's birth year, 1872, that's 18, and 1878, that is 1878, Mother's year 24, that total is 42. So just keep that in mind as we go further. But Mother said, if we have to assign a number to Sri Aurobindo's spiritual work, that number would be 12. Which is a multiple of 6 again. And how does that come? Of course, the name I've already said. If you add his date of birth, keep the August month out. 1 + 5 + 1 + 8 + 7 + 2, that comes to 24. 2 + 4 again is 6. August itself has 6 letters. You add 6 + 6, 12. You have to give credit to Amal Kiran, to do that kind of thing. But what is important is the second part. How 12 was an important number in Sri Aurobindo's yogic journey. Now, 12 is the multiple of double of 6. So, first meeting with the mother, 1914. 6 years after that, mother comes, so a little bit of expedited. From 1920, another 6 years pass, the major overmind siddhi happens, right? Which is, those of you who are new to Sri Aurobindo and the mother, overmind is a plane of consciousness which Sri Aurobindo also defines as the plane of gods of all religion. That's the plane from where all these divine powers descend. But that is not the ultimate, that is not Sachidanand. Between Sachidanand and the plane of gods is where the square will come in, which is the supermind in Sri Aurobindo's planes of consciousness. So I don't want to make it too philosophical. Some of it should be left for you to explore on your own. But the fact that the overmind consciousness descended into the very physical of Sri Aurobindo, which happened on 24th November 1926, was a major step in his own supramental yoga. He was always curious to get to that supramental consciousness, the plane beyond the plane of gods, which will be solution to many of the evolutionary crises that we face on Earth. Look at the number here. Again, from 1914 to 1926, that major siddhi that happens when the descent of overmind happens, gap of 12 years. And in between that, mother's arrival was a very key milestone, because somebody had asked the mother, could you have not achieved this supermind on your own? Did you need Shakti, the mother? And Sri Aurobindo said that if it was just about my own spiritual realization and few people around me, I would have done it on my own. But our yoga is not for any one individual or few individuals. Our yoga is for the earth consciousness, for the earth to become ready for a divine life. Talk about regenerative renaissance. That is the regeneration Sri Aurobindo is after. That's what their whole purpose of that yoga is. And for that, he said, Shakti was needed, because that makes the avataric work complete. So between 1914 and 1926, the major thing that happened was mothers coming in 1920 permanently. And after 1926, Sri Aurobindo puts mother in charge of the inner and outer work of all the sadhaks. It's also called as the foundation of the ashram, which grew kind of organically, but it's celebrated as a birthday of ashram also. Again, another major siddhi that happens is 1938, gap of 12 years again. So 1938 was when, so once Sri Aurobindo had attained overmind, in the physical. See, people had also asked about what is it, many other yogis have had the descent of Krishna consciousness or the plane of gods over the last several, centuries or millennia. What is different about Sri Aurobindo's Siddhi is that it was not just coming and going, it got fixed on the physical level. So there was no difference between Krishna and Sri Aurobindo. And to understand it very simply, that every cell of his being was suffused with that overmental consciousness in 1926. After that, his yogic work was all to bring down the supermind or the supramental consciousness. Now, in the Veda, the supermind is called as Maharloka, or in the Upanishad, it is called as Vijnanamaya plane of consciousness, which is, Sri Aurobindo translates also very simply as truth consciousness with capital T. It is perfect truth. Without the establishment of perfect truth consciousness, all the problems that we face on earth today in our earthly life cannot be permanently resolved. So we can try various isms, various systems, various philanthropic works, or various, all works of good intention. But until the truth consciousness is permanently established and becomes the leading power, new creation is not possible. So Sri Aurobindo's work from 1926 was focused on bringing down that supermind or that supramental consciousness. And in 1938, it gets fixed in the subtle physical. Between 1926 and 1938, there are many conversations of the mother where you'll find reference to how she could feel it in the mental and the vital aura of Sri Aurobindo. But it was not getting fixed in the subtle physical. And yet, the work was not ended there. And 1938 is also the time when Sri Aurobindo, as the modern biographers would write, had his accident. So he was in the bed, for many months. And he took on not only the work of bringing down, hastening the process of supermind in the physical, but he also was looking after what was happening in the world, Second World War, which was, Sri Aurobindo said many times, yes, out on the outer side it was Hitler and all that stuff was happening, but what is the inner significance of that war was that it was a hostile attack on the work of bringing down supermind. And if you read works like George Van Brekham's and many of them, they have written about what was the real agenda of Hitler and how India and Indian spirituality was actually on target. But that's another kind of history, another Shakti Kumbh to talk about all that. But the so-called accident gave him a little leisure to Sri Aurobindo to focus, to hasten the process of descent. And yet, with all these hostile forces attacking the work, it could not be fixed. And then comes another gap of 12 years, 1950, when Sri Aurobindo makes the final sacrifice of leaving his physical body and ensuring that the supermind descends in the physical, which happened not in another 12 years, but in 6 years, in 1956, which is what is on 29th February we'll be celebrating the anniversary of. So 6 and 12 are very interesting numbers when you look at Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's yogic work. And even before yogic work, actually, I found one other interesting coincidence. 1893, Sri Aurobindo lands in India after spending 14 years in England. And then in Ramayana, we have 14 years exile of Rama. Again, interesting correlation. And 1905, after a gap of 12 years, Sri Aurobindo comes out in public as a revolutionary. Between 1893 to 1905, he was doing a lot of revolutionary work for India's freedom. But it was 1905 that brought him out in front, which was the partition of Bengal, Bang Bhang, as is called in Indian history textbooks. The British government partitioned Bengal into two, and that compelled Sri Aurobindo to come out in front. And then, of course, he was known as the most dangerous man even before that, but that made it public. And then 1907, when they tried to arrest him for the first time, the whole of country came to know of this young, lean revolutionary with a very soft, almost feminine voice. But again, 12 years I thought was very interesting because he would have been happy working in the, behind the screens. So now, why 12 is interesting? Mother has spoken of 12 as double perfection, where both spiritual and material perfection gets stabilized. So 12 is an interesting number. Of course, in the mother symbol also, as you saw, there are 12 petals or 12 virtues or soul values that we must cultivate in us if we want to be a perfect instrument of mother's work. It's not to become great yogi, but to be accepted as their perfect instrument. So 12 is again, the perfection, the double perfection. And because it is perfection, hence it also is supramental world. Because what we see now, what we experience now, the world is based on mental consciousness. So just a quick thing, maybe for some of you who may not know this, in the Vedic cosmology, we speak of seven lokas, seven worlds, seven planes of consciousness. So they are divided into two hemispheres. Lower hemisphere has three, upper hemisphere is three. And then there is something called as link world in between. So the lower three are what we experience, which is the consciousness of matter, life, and mind. Entire system that we have created is a result of that mental consciousness. The upper hemisphere is three who are actually one, which is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat is pure existence, Chit is pure consciousness, Ananda is pure bliss. The whole aspiration is to bring down that upper hemisphere, which is the divine life, onto the earth life. How will you do that? You have to go through that link world. Link world is what is supermind. What is Vijnanamaya of the Upanishads or the Maharloka of the Veda, right? And that is perfect truth consciousness. The characteristic of that truth consciousness plane is, Sri Aurobindo uses three Vedic words to define Satyam, Ritam, Brihat. Satyam is perfect truth. Ritam is perfect order, right order. And or truth in action. See, truth is there on just absolute plane, but in action, when it manifests as truth. And Brihat means wide, vast. So complete vastness, where multiplicity and oneness can coexist. Below supermind, they will never coexist. And from mind to supermind, there are many ranges, which Sri Aurobindo goes in detail, and Aditi is the right person to speak about that from an integral yoga psychology. From mind to supermind, what are the ranges? But just below supermind is overmind, which is the plane of gods. So when we are trying to ascend in our consciousness, we are going beyond mind. But you can't skip. Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga is not just about ascending, it's about transformation. So you have to transform the physical and the vital. You have to take them along, which is why it is most difficult or it is most simple. Because it can become most simple path if you can do perfect surrender. To whom? To the mother. Because she is the one who will hold us as we struggle through the breaking of the pots and the converting the breakdown into breakthrough. As you said, if we can surrender, do the perfect surrender. So perfection is important on this path. Because we cannot perfectly surrender, so we struggle. But let's just come back to make it a little, more interesting with understanding Sri Aurobindo's symbol. Again, 6. Now, 6, Mother said, as I said, symbolizes divine creation or new creation. And 12 is the perfect, stable, perfect manifestation, which is stabilized. Again, from Mother's volume, I've just put down here all these various numbers. These are the significances she gave. Again, many of these things came in conversations with Satprem and Sujata Nahar. Because again, see, Satprem was working with a tantric at the time. And he was asked to draw a symbol, a tantric symbol, 72 times. And he was getting a little worked up, 72 times to do it perfectly. And then in a conversation, Mother said, show it to me. I'll tell you what this means. And then in that conversation, she gives out the significance of all these numbers. So I've just highlighted a few that are of our concern. 3, the Satchidananda, because 6 is connected with 3, which I just also said. The upper hemisphere is 3, the lower hemisphere is 3. 4 is because there are 4 sides to square. So 4 is manifestation. Then 9, it takes 9 months for baby to come out, so gestation, new birth. 12, as I said, double perfection. 6, she also talked about the double, the numbers, and then she said you keep on adding and you get different meanings, but she cautions do not make dogma out of them, which is very important because we are operating from the mind and mind needs surety, and we said that's it. No. So it is just a good exercise for us to know. So when we are like today, it's an interesting date, 26, 2, 6, 2, 2, 4, everything even number. Or when I was taking a class the other day, it was very interesting, 2, 2, 2, 2, 4, 22, 2, 24. So just having an exposure gives us a little, it makes us step back and say, this date means something. Can I make it to mean something for me? Can I make a new progress? So it helps us in that way, yes. 42, as I said, if you add 18, which is the 1 plus 8 plus 7 plus 2 of Sri Aurobindo's birth year, and 1878, 24, the total comes to 42. And look what Mother said 42 symbolizes: dual manifestation of the Supreme and nature. Ishvara and Ishvari, Parmeshwar and Parmeshwari, Shiva and Shakti. Only when the two avatars, the dual avatar, descend, perfect manifestation is possible. So before Sri Aurobindo, many avatars came. Shakti also came, but partially. When Ram comes, Sita comes, but they hardly ever live together. Sita has to go away so that Ram Rajya can be established. When Krishna comes, Radha comes in the Ananda form, but they are never together after childhood. Krishna is with Rukmani, who is the avatar of Shri, right? Krishna is also with Draupadi, who is the manifestation of Kali power of the mother, but they are all partial, not complete, right? There is no temple where Krishna and Rukmani are worshipped together. Only when Sri Aurobindo comes and when Mother Meera Alfasa comes, 42 happens. The dual manifestation of complete, supreme, and complete nature. Nature not as Prakriti, but as Shakti. The Para Prakriti. That happens. And that is where the square symbol is so important, which is manifestation and with 4 sides. So there are conversations of Sri Aurobindo as to what square represents. And again, he says also, like the mother, don't make dogma out of it, but out of for various reasons, certain symbols have, or certain geometric shapes end up symbolizing certain things. So square, he said, symbolizes truth beyond the mind. So square is important in Sri Aurobindo's symbol. Now, star, we've been talking about 6-pointed star. And Sri Aurobindo distinguishes between star and sun when people get vision. Star is light in ignorance, which will go away when dawn comes, because dawn will bring the sun, right? And yet star is important because the light has to go into the lower hemisphere, which is the field of ignorance, as the Vedic cosmology speaks of, the avidya. From avidya only we can get to vidya. And the link world of supermind is important. So if you go deeper into Sri Aurobindo's philosophical explanation, the symbol becomes even further interesting. But in a short period of time, I can only just drop hints. Interestingly, there is also a conversation of Sri Aurobindo where he says, even in perfect art, you need a triangle. So triangle is 3 sides. And one of the artists, Nandalal Bose, had spoken about triangle in any art form. And he said that triangle represents nature and tradition, the two at the bottom, and the top apex is inspiration. But Sri Aurobindo corrected that. When it was pointed out to him, he said, but they have to be in perfect harmony. Only then perfect artistic creation happens. But we have to go deeper than just that. Again, these are Sri Aurobindo's own conversations, where he said triangle can represent both the lower hemisphere and the upper hemisphere of the Vedic cosmology. Now, the lower would be the ascending triangle, which starts from matter, life, and mind. And the upper one would be descending triangle, which would be the Sat, Chit, Ananda. Right? This is up to what Sri Aurobindo has spoken of. And then he said that we can also even combine and to make something else. And then, of course, I said square. These are again Sri Aurobindo's own words, where he says, square is always a symbol of the supermind. And the disciple was curious. He said, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know? He said, I am saying it because it came to me. Somebody must have at some point of time looked at square and thought of it as some sort of perfection. And that experience stayed somewhere in the universe, and it gets revealed to Sri Aurobindo, who is trying to bring that perfection down on earth. So naturally, the perfection of the square is the perfection of the supermind, right? So when you combine all these things together, you get Sri Aurobindo's symbol. Perfection of the supermind. Lotus, I'll just mention a little bit further. Water, what does water represent? We'll talk about that. But triangles also Sri Aurobindo has spoken of, right? The descending and the ascending. This is again from the ashram archives, the drawing office. The perfect measurement, how it was stylized, just as a way of documentation. Now, look at what's there in the square. You have the lotus. Okay, first is the water. Above the water, you have 3 leaves. 3. Then you have 6 outer leaves. And then you have 9 inner leaves. So 9 plus 6 plus 3 is again 12, which is Sri Aurobindo's spiritual number, as Mother reminds. 3 represents Sachidanand, the beginning of creation. Without Sachidanand, without the upper hemisphere, nothing is possible, right? Because Sachidanand is, everything is, right? So 3, without the 3 petals. 6 is the new creation, the new birth, the 6 outer petals. And then you have 9, after a period, after a gestation, the new perfect creation is possible. And when you combine all this is the double perfection. The double perfection of material and spiritual together. Inner and outer together. And it is happening in the water. Water represents multiplicity. Water represents we have in the Indian tradition an old visual image, an old vision, which Mother also has spoken of because she experienced it, she realized it, of Vishnu lying in the Kshir Sagar, right? Before the creation begins, before the manifestation begins, in a state of Yoga Nidra. But he's lying on ocean. In the Veda, water has deep significance. The ocean of inconscience and the ocean of superconscience. So, Srishti, manifestation has to begin actually it is coming down from superconscience, but for the evolutionary purpose, it has to go from below, from the inconscience. Right? So, when you combine all this, then you get what Mother said as the significance, which is in 1958. where she explained exactly what this means. So what does the descending triangle represents? These are mother words. The descending triangle represents the upper hemisphere, the Parardha of the Veda, Sat, Chit, Ananda. So 3 points, Sat, Chit, Ananda. Right? The ascending triangle represents the aspiration, the aspiring answer from the matter under the form of life, light, and love. This is the inconscience. And my experience has told me that unless we go to the origin of things, we don't understand fully. So how does this whole manifestation begins? And Mother has told a story of creation. And she was telling it to children. So she's told it in a very simple way. So what happens is that there is some supreme that, and that was lonely, because who would want to be lonely, right? Just when there is one. One in divine numerology, which I just shared, is the origin, one. When it's only one gets lonely, and one concentrates on itself, one becomes two. So two represents the decision taken for creation. So one becomes two, not that two are any, the second is lesser than the one. They are just two who are actually one. And then comes the creation. So the one, supreme, the two that gets created is the Shakti of the supreme. And they decide, okay, it will be Shakti's work to go and create. So now that we are two, we are having fun, let's have many. Maybe we'll have more fun. So the Shakti says, okay, I'll go and create. And from two become four. So the first four emanations are sent out to create multiplicity. So these first four emanations, Mother said, are consciousness, life, truth, and what's the fourth one? Ananda, or joy, bliss, right? So the four happily go out, and they keep going down. Actually, it's like a descent happening. So they keep going down, and in the process, as they're coming down, they're becoming more powerful, more complete in themselves. And by the time they come down, they recognize, why do we even need to stay connected to the source? So let's just become our own, because they have free will. They are sent out in complete freedom. So because of the free will, complete freedom, they say we are lords in our own. We are complete in our own self, and they sever the connection. And they plunge themselves down into the lower ocean, which is the ocean of the inconscience, below matter. And they somehow get converted into their exact opposite, because they have severed the connection from the mother, from the Shakti. So consciousness becomes inconscience, life becomes death, bliss becomes suffering, and what was the other one? Truth becomes falsehood. These, Mother says, are the four original asuras, the four original hostile powers. But then she says, they are Mother's children. They are not coming out of anywhere else. They are coming from the same source, the first sons. But then these asuras create havoc, so a cry goes up. The aspiration from below goes up. And the two have another conference and say, let's do something else. Some mistake happened. Create again. And this time, Shakti says, I'm not going to let my children go on their own. I'll go with them. I'll put a piece of me in each one of these children. And that is the psychic, the spark of the divine, put in the next four emanations that come out, from which we all as humans have come up. All life has come out from that. Which are the gods? I mean, those four emanations are gods, but from gods, then the whole Srishti begins, then the whole other story continues. So, but the connection is always there. and sort of a puzzle is added, you have that little angusht matra, that little spark in you. See if you can come back to me. That's the whole yoga, right? So the ascending triangle, the ascending aspiration is the aspiration of the matter. Through life, in matter comes life. In life comes mind. Light also represents mind. But just with knowledge, just with mind, we can't do everything. We need a power higher than that, which is the power of love. So actually, Mother has several versions of this story. In one version, she says, when the cry goes up from inconscience, Mother sends, or Supreme sends a ray of love down. Because there is love hidden at the core of the matter, there is a possibility that matter will one day reveal the face of the spirit. So you see, ascending triangle, 3 points: matter, life, light, and love. You can also think of it simply: life is life, light is knowledge, mind, love is heart, the true heart, the psychic love, not the emotional love which has ego, which is based on the ego, but which is based on psychic, the true love, right? So that's that. Where the two triangles meet. See, I'm not talking about Sachidananda because who can really talk about Sachidananda? Only one who is living in Sachidananda. Otherwise, it is all just theory, right? What is Sat, what is Chit, what is Ananda? But we experience the ascending triangle. Off and on, we experience that aspiration. When we want to create something, that's an aspiration of life force. When we want to know something, that's an aspiration of light. When we want to experience love, that is an aspiration of love. So ascension is what we experience most of the time in our experience. And where the two meet is the perfect manifestation possible, which is supermind or supramental manifestation. And in the multiplicity of the water, where Vishnu is lying, is the perfect avatar, the lotus of 12, 6 plus 3 on 3 leaves. Sorry, 6 plus 9 plus 3, 12, which is the avatar of the future. Because 12 is perfect manifestation stabilized, double material and spiritual. It's no wonder why a freedom fighter would become a supramental yogi. He was a revolutionary in the political sense, he was a revolutionary in the yogic sense, right? So, this is the aspiration from below, which is an aspiration in matter. We are made up of matter, right? And this is the grace from above. One way to understand the descending triangle is, if you go back to Sri Aurobindo's littlest book, The Mother, where he says in the very beginning, there are only two powers, which are the start and the end of everything: aspiration from below and grace from above. Somebody once wrote to Sri Aurobindo, I am not fit for your yoga. I am so unworthy. He said, where do these questions come from? And this was someone who has been in the ashram under direct instruction and guidance from Sri Aurobindo. He said, where do these ideas come from? Nobody is worthy. Nobody is fit. Only grace. Open yourself to the grace from above, which is grace of the mother. That will take you on the path, right? So that's the grace from above, the descending triangle. And when the two meet, we have the square. Now, this multiplicity is also interesting because it's not about uniformity. So perfect creation, new world, new age, new creation will not be a uniform, that everything is same. There will be multiplicity, but multiplicity in the truth of the oneness. Anything below, even up to the overmind, the fact that we have so many religions, so many spiritual paths, is because this is the expression of an overmind. When supramental world gets created, it does not mean that all this will go away. See, when mind comes up in evolutionary, it's not that all the lower life forms go away. Prototype of mind is human being, right? Human being is the mental creature, hence the word man, which comes from manas, which means mind. So we are the prototype of the mental plane of consciousness. Other life forms don't go away. When supermind is perfectly created, anything below will not go away, except that there will be a possibility of creating a divine life on the earth. Activation of this Sachidanand principle. Correct? So, this, I've already spoken of that. So, as I said, ultimately, we have to only constantly aspire and open ourselves to the grace from above, which, to my mind, is the perfect explanation of the six-pointed star. Aspire at life, light, love, and open ourselves to the grace from above. Whether we know the theory or philosophy of Sachidanand doesn't matter if we open ourselves to the grace. So with that, I conclude. Thank you so much for patiently listening.